We would just like to announce to all attendees that we will start in about 5 minutes, the time for Mr. Viola to arrive. He should be there soon. So thank you for waiting.
Mi mettete qui e poi vi chiamiamo tra un attimo? Tipo qua o dove volete? Non posso cominciare prima che si sieda felice. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon also to all those that are connected online. For those that don't know me, my name is Andrea Renda. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for European Policy Studies. I lead a research team that goes under the name of GRID, Global Governance, Regulation, Innovation, and the Digital Economy here at CEPS. And it's my pleasure to be here with Massimo and with our friends from Cassa Depositi e Prestiti in this second event that we organized together. As you have seen, and you are here to attend, so you know hopefully what the event is about. Today we talk about deep tech, talent, and entrepreneurship. So we talk about unicorns. We talk about the future of EU industrial policy and the future of digital skills to some extent in the EU. And we will do this with guests of honor and with the protagonists of this, with startups, with entrepreneurs that navigate through the difficult waters of modern day digital technologies and the digital economy. So without further ado, and I'll be coming back to moderate the first session today, so I will introduce our speakers in just a few minutes. I hand over to Massimo De Eufemia from Cassa Depositi e Prestiti for his welcome remarks.
Thank you very much. A warm welcome to this second initiative, joint initiative that we put in place between CDP and SEPS. The first one, some of you perhaps were not with us. We did it last June, and we discussed here in this room, and also with a large participation from remote, about the experience of national implementing agencies along the management of the multi-year facilities that we are managing, in particular in Italy. Then today we dedicate this session to the deep tech and the experiences that we have in Italy. Still, there is a large gap that we have to deep in the coming years. The last results we see is that it is not only the Italian market, but is the European market that suffers in comparison with our major competitors around the world, the Asian competitors, the US competitors. And our market is suffering, but there are good examples around. We try to bring today some of these examples to learn the good stories and try to split these stories in Europe. It is not just CDP, it is a group of implementing partners along Europe with French, German partners, and we are working together in the European Association of Venture Capital to do so. We are also using the European Union funds available to support venture capital. And the last experience we did was using the InvestEU guarantee for 260 million just a few weeks ago to use these resources to support startups in the Italian market. And we got positive surprises, because if we look to the statistics, the last 2 years in Italy, our market is growing like that. Is 5 times what was 3 years ago. Of course, is still a small market in comparison to the rest of Europe, and of course in comparison to the rest of the world, and in particular US and Asia. But anyway, we see from these results that perhaps also the role and the contribution of institutions like Cassa Depositi e Prestiti could bring the difference. So I'm really happy that you are with us today. We hope that we can repeat this sort of joint cooperation soon with a new program that we will implement in 2023, continuing this discussion on main European Union policies together. So thanks, Andrea, for all the work you have done. And here we have Francesca Bria and Roberto Viola. So I leave the floor to you, and I hope that this discussion could be useful for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Massimo. And an applause to you. Without further ado, we call on stage our two guests for the fireside chat that opens this event. So Roberto Viola, Director General at DG Connect in the European Commission. Roberto, please. And you can choose your seat because we have more chairs. The next session will have more participants. And Francesca Bria, President of Cassa Depositi e Prestiti Venture Capital and Fondo Nazionale Innovazione. All right, it's a pleasure to have you. Roberto, I don't know if you've ever been at SEPS in the past. I mean, in your long career here in Brussels, probably yes, but everything that is pre-pandemic, we have always a problem remembering exactly when and how. And Francesca, you know, you have been here indeed in the last super crowded event that we had here before we had to shut down everything because of the pandemic, when Margrethe Vestager came here to present the data strategy and the AI white paper. That was February 2020. There were like 400 people in between here and downstairs, and maybe some people were actually here, but then obviously the world changed a week later. So I just want to go a little bit deeper into this topic of nurturing deep tech unicorns. And so start perhaps with Roberto, because I want to give some meaning to this title. You say, I haven't chosen the title, you probably would tell me, but the issue is, what do we mean by deep tech, and does really Europe focus on deep tech and on unicorns? What is behind this idea?
Thank you, Andre.
Yeah, there's yeah, there's an on. Yeah.
Too deep tech for me.
Yeah.
So thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Sebs, for the invitation, and thank you, CDP. I'm very pleased and honored to be with Francesca in this fireside chat. So, two questions. I reverse the order. Does Europe need deep tech, and what is really deep tech about? Now, does Europe need deep tech? It's more or less the same question. Does Europe need electricity, water, or basic infrastructure? I think in the modern world, if you don't have and you don't really nurture and have good ecosystem on deep tech, you are not, I mean, a world player. I mean, that's it. So it is a must. It is a must, and it must be part of any innovation or any policy that to really nurture, protect, and make sure that there are the right conditions for deep tech. And then we will go into the usual common places. Europe is not a good place for this, and the regulation and all of this will come in a second. This, but then linked with this, what is deep tech? And okay, you make your definition. It's just a suggestion from my side. Whatever brings disruption to existing processes, way of doing things, is probably a deep tech. Because we have seen it, I mean, over and over, especially in the last few years in digital economy. Those that succeed are those that really have a new way of proposing something, being a process, being a product, whatever. And this makes a deep tech, of course, linked with some technology innovation. But frankly, the degree could vary. For example, Europe is extremely strong in terms of unicorns in the last 2 years in the payment area. Or in transactional, I mean, let's say the internet of transactions. And it's not just for chance. Because the fact that we have developed such a structured ecosystem of payment, the most interoperable in the world, we have gone very far with respect to any part of the world in terms of digital identity, digital credential, interoperability between public and private services, really created an ecosystem by which we have companies now that are unicorns. So there's a correlation between using particular technology, identifying the market, and then the ecosystem you have. I don't think we can invent the synthetic copy of the Silicon Valley in Europe, and it's not even, I mean, necessary. What we have to ask ourselves is the ecosystem, the European ecosystem, for the way it's done, an ecosystem which is conducive to this? What are our strengths? And I mean, given what I said at the very beginning, that's why I started with this, that it's an essential element of a competing, I mean, we aim and we are a technology superpower in the world. A technology superpower without deep tech is not a superpower. So that's as a way of introduction.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roberto. Now this makes with a nice ending. I mean, you certainly have said something that is very right, because you know, the music started playing, and then so that said, which also Perhaps, Roberto, but then I will provoke you on that in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
No, provoke you. I mean, provoke you in a positive sense. No, that you'll be happy about that, because the fact that you've mentioned the payment systems and so the financial markets perhaps also brings a focus on the fact that regulation sometimes can be an element, a driver of innovation, right? So we have in Europe been pioneers of regulation that is innovation friendly, in particular, Second Payment Services Directive, but also everything that is revolving around data at the moment. The Data Act, the Data Governance Act going forward might create that environment where startups can actually find the data, apply their new business models to the opportunities that are being generated. So, and with Francesca, I'll provoke her as well, meaning, but this time is perhaps a little bit more subtle as a question. Do we need unicorns? And do we need only unicorns in Europe? Not that Roberto said that. Obviously, he didn't say that we need only unicorns. But is the EU right in focusing so much on deep tech and potentially setting a target for the number of unicorns by the end of the decade? Is it on there?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Also delighted to be here with Roberto and this conversation, which I think is very spot on. Let's say my answer to your question is, first of all, I think this is the right moment to be strategic and ambitious. And the reason why is obviously because we do have such challenges and such disruptions already happening, and perma-crisis, permanent multiple crises that we're facing, that if we are not ambitious, strategic, and if we don't unleash all the instruments that we have looking forward, I mean, looking into where we want to be next, I think we are going to suffer. And already we have to give responses which are very concrete about the suffering that already we had to endure with the pandemic, and now with the war in Europe, and with the energy crisis, and with disruptions of the value chains, and the questions of how this will impact society. So one, for example, maybe example to show why do we need deep tech is that if you look at the low carbon supply chain and value chain, so let's say the green innovation wave, where I think, and I hope Europe this time will be the forefront, will lead, more than 60% of what we need, so the technologies, the solutions that we need for decarbonizing the economy and really get to carbon neutrality, so to net zero, if we manage to stay in the Paris line, is still, it's available, but it's still in the labs. It's still in the universities, it's still at the level of demonstrator or prototyping, so TLR 4 or 5 even. And we need to push it out of the lab, so out of science, let's say, into the industry and into society. And this we need to be fast. So we need, this is science intensive, is high knowledge intensive, and it needs a big push to get into the business, so to have our companies to grow and not only to stay small. So I think unicorns are actually good because we cannot just stay small. I mean, small is not always beautiful as we tend to think. So they need to grow those companies and be sustainable, but also we have to get the innovation into the society. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think Europe can have a competitive advantage at the moment, because we do have finally all the little pieces coming together. So we have pieces of legislations which are ambitious. I mean, I'm just referring to the Green Deal, of course, but also the Repower EU, but also, for example, industrial policy that for the first time, I think, since many years, and I've been in Brussels quite a while, we recognize everyone that we have to be connected in our industrial policy. So it has to be pan-European, because if nation states go each on its own, I think we're going to increase the gaps and we're going to leave countries behind, but also, as we know, not all the countries are equipped to face shocks in the same way. So we need to be together. So we have, for example, well, Roberto can talk, of course, much better about it, but for me to see also the EU Chips Act, the alliances, the industry alliances when it comes to batteries, when it comes to hydrogen, when it comes to chips and raw materials. So really, for the first time, we have the regulation, the laws, the policies in place, but also the industrial policy instruments and the possibilities to say, as the US, I mean, rightly so ambitiously are doing, I think with their Inflation Reduction Act, which of course there are of course debates, but I think to be ambitious there and to say we can unleash also subsidies, new instruments, and venture capital is one of those very key instruments. So to your question, no, I think venture capital and the deep tech ecosystem and the unicorns are a part of a much ambitious strategic industrial policy of Europe that looks at the right direction for the future.
Okay, so is it correct to assume that thinking about startups, which has been a dominant refrain for many years, is not necessarily the most important worry of the EU at the moment, but rather the scale-up part seems to be one of the most difficult challenges for enterprises. Well, I've seen figures on startups that are quite reassuring for Europe, so I don't know if you would confirm, Roberto. And what is being done and what can be further done to nurture, as we said in the title of this event, deep tech firms? For example, the Digital Europe program, or even legislation that tries to put enterprises and smaller companies in the condition in which they can actually innovate and have real market opportunities.
But you are right, Andrea. I hope it works. Yes, yeah. It works. You are right to say that startup and this kind of narrative is very present in this city. Too present sometimes, because those things should not be empty words or words just for a chat or for a conference. Then you have to be very consequential on how you do things, and things don't happen in 1 minute. It takes time to have a result. And also, when we say we need to be startup friendly, then you really mean it, not just say it. Because, for instance, DSA, Digital Service Act, very clearly puts a threshold on the obligations of companies that offer platform services, clearly indicating that, I mean, the largest company, the larger are the obligations. Now, if then after DSA we will start to pass all sorts of legislation which we will contradict this approach, that's not the right way to go. Yeah, there might be good reasons, protecting citizens, fundamental value, all of this. So there are these two irresistible trends. I mean, to actually nurture a startup ecosystem and to have the European reflex, which is the so-called human-centered approach, which means rules must protect, I mean, the fundamental values of being together. Now, the difficult part is to reconcile these two. And probably the point of reconciliation, you are right, is looking at how to do smart rules that instead of inhibiting companies to develop in Europe, they favor it. The typical example, it's again, I use a buzzword that everybody uses. I think 99% of the people don't understand it, that they use it, sandboxes. Sandboxing, it's a very intelligent tool if you know how to use it. Sandbox meaning that for certain obligations, you can actually help smaller companies and startups to comply with. In the financial worlds, in the world of high-risk AI, it's very difficult. You say, yeah, you know, it's life-threatening. Yeah, you're a small company. Do what you want, or in pharma research. So even if you are small, if you are in the business of supplying something that has an health risk or whatever other risk, of course you need to comply. but you can comply being helped and being explained. And for instance, we have with the Digital Europe program this idea of having the digital innovation hubs, where actually you can have not only co-working spaces, but also spaces where you can have legal clinics, experts that can help these companies to comply, experts that can help these companies to be present in different markets outside Europe. They actually can experiment different ways of compliance in terms of product and service design. So this is what you need to do. And of course, I mean, also help with the clearly kickstarting the funding side. And that's where, with the institutions such as the CDP and I didn't want to do that. And the fund that Francesca is president, that's where there's a synergy of working together. So we have created a number of funds, for instance, in the area of chips. We have the intention to do the same in the area of quantum. Actually, we are doing it also in the area of blockchain and in many other areas. And the idea is that this seed money that the Commission is putting into, let's say, especially equity, because that's the difficult part of this story, would be possibly a multiplier taken by institutions such as CDP and others that can actually then amplify this seed money and make sure that something that is very difficult in Europe, equity capital for this type of deep tech, is available in these areas.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I'm going to come to Francesca in a moment because Roberto helped me in building a bridge to the national side. But I think it's very important to also contextualize the effort of the Commission in a situation in which it's complicated to imagine obvious alliances. So Europe is pursuing a strategic autonomy and, to some extent, a technological sovereignty agenda, which changes a little bit also the priority in terms of where you want to create talent and entrepreneurship going forward. A Europe that sort of has to chart its own path, let's say, compared to others. And in a situation in which there is obviously an effort in member states to pursue both recovery and resilience through an unprecedented flow of funds that needs to be really deployed for, on the one hand, protecting economy and society, but most importantly, to achieve systemic transformation. So that is creating a series of tensions that could be very positive if the multi-level governance of the EU level and the national level is, moving in a consistent direction. It can create, obviously, problems if member states go in a sparse way and the European Commission is not able to keep them together. So, Francesca, how do you see the interface between the EU level and the national level in that respect? And what are the specific peculiarities of how CDP is looking into the Italian industrial, let's say, texture to try to develop entrepreneurship there?
Well, specifically what the National Innovation Fund is doing, I think the synergies are very clear. And also we have been, I think, innovating also at the bureaucratic level, which is actually good to be able to spend well, for example, the next generation EU money through the national resilience plans, because the national fund that I lead is now allocated more than 500 million to entrepreneurship and startups in the two fields of creating two funds, one for the green transition and one for the digital transition. And we aim to mobilize around 700 millions, which is creating, I think, this new wave that we need of clean technologies and renewable technologies, not only investing in equities of startups, but also creating new funds that can come into the market and develop the market. I think there is something that Roberto said that is very important, that I see how, for example, the National Innovation Fund is acting in Italy, that we are really stimulating the ecosystem, we are stimulating the market, because we do invest in direct way, but also indirectly creating, in other funds, and we attracting first-time team, first-time funds, which is very good, consolidating the funds that we have, and also investing in new next-generation accelerators and in technology transfer hubs. So we're really, let's say, creating the backbone, the infrastructure for the market to grow, and delivering impact where it's needed, which I think it's the big challenge of these all funds that we are leashing and of the resilience and recovery facility in particular. And I have to say, I'm also very pleased to see that we have these horizontal priorities, for example, sustainability, but also balancing out territorial gaps. We invest around, the whole Next Generation EU implies that you have to invest 40% in the South, but also as a fund, we have a priority to invest in the South, and we also have a gender priority. So we're trying to kick off, more and more startups which have women founders, but also the investors that have key women in the teams. And I think this is particularly important. So delivering where it's needed, getting where it's needed, I think is very, very critical. But going back to your question about the synergies, I think the startups are a good example because they're born a bit European, they're born global. So it's clear, for example, if you look at deep tech startup investment, now in Europe is 25%, so they're worth 700 billions, the deep tech startup ecosystem. And they need the internal market. They need also harmonization in the fiscal regime. They need and harmonize, of course, investments which are equity investment, which is pan-European. So the effort, for example, that we're doing with the European Investment Bank ecosystem and the European Investment Council, the European Innovation Council, is really to mobilize like the CDP, but also BPI France and KFA and the others, National Promotion Institution and venture capital funds, to deploy in a pan-European way. So there is this Tech Champions 10 billion fund, which is a multi-state fund where 16 governments are part of it, and we are also part of it. And the aim is to create other 10 venture capital funds in Europe where we can really have these deep tech champions of the future growing. So there, it's a real national governments, but also pan-European effort, and it can only be this way. I think that's where maybe we can do a reflection, where I think with digitization and the green transition, or maybe we are at a stage where we cannot behave anymore like the previous industrial cycles. National governments, of course, they will always compete on some things, but I think it's much bigger the gains where we are together. It's the same, Roberto was citing infrastructures like quantum or supercomputing or, next generation innovations that need a pan-European effort. So we need to be, yes, we need to be more and more there.
Thank you very much. And then that's a little bit the interface between the EU and the national level has a number of variable geometries, like the important projects of common European interests are sort of an intermediate layer between the two. That said, the Commission is doing something that, in my opinion, is rather new in this respect when we talk about Startup Nation standards. I don't know, Robert, if you want to say something about this initiative that sometimes is underrepresented in the debates in Brussels in particular. Also the fact of collecting good practices for startups in the member states and bringing them together under a common umbrella framework that sort of tries to promote consistency in the way in which member states try to nurture talent and startups in their territories.
No, thank you, Andrea, for mentioning Startup Nation, because it's indeed something we have seen to be concrete and very popular with startups themselves. I recently had a debate with a group, and in the group there were 4 unicorns, and they all really were quite enthusiastic about this idea. What is Startup Nation? I can say it is the 28th member state when it comes to company law and the way, startup should be treated in national legislation. So, in other words, the narrative of every politician in Europe is startups are very important. I mean, so you always hear skills and startup, exactly what we miss in Europe. But it is in every speech. So we say, walk the talk, walk the talk. So make sure that the way to set up a company, the way that a company is accountable to local legislation is exactly the same all over Europe. I mean, and we are quite far from this objective. I mean, every time the Commission has tried this idea in company law, contract law, to have a kind of harmonized approach, the enthusiasm of member states has been relatively limited, if I can use, an understatement here. The point is exactly this. So, first of all, to create a movement by the startup themselves that together they kind of exchange experience, best practices, and understand where things are getting, not in the right direction. Create a collection of horror stories, but also good practices. And also, take the politicians for what they say. So for startup is important, then go to the specific setting and say, okay, these are all the problems in this country about setting up a startup. So we do it through a number of sports initiatives, and also with the Portuguese government, we have created ESMA, which is actually the place where all this could be, let's say, driven in terms of a kind of aggregator, European aggregator. We have created now the legal concept of European Digital Infrastructure Consortia, EDIC, which means a group of member states can come together and do things which are European entities. So the whole idea is starting from the bottom, from the experience of the startup, to spot, where we can create a much more urbanized environment, bring it, to the, let's say, decision maker level, and make sure they are aware. So it's like behavioral psychology, what actually is going wrong, and then correct it, and possibly convince them to adhere to common standards.
That's a very interesting initiative. That's why I wanted to really explore that with you a little bit, because it creates potentially a completely new set of opportunities and for European startups, and also for the European project in and of itself. And Francesco, well, we're coming near to the end of our time. So shortly, I will probably ask you to interact a little bit with a final statement. What I'd like to know is, exactly because we've been exploring the interaction between the EU level and the member state level. Perhaps, obviously, this is not foreseen and not prepared. If Roberto could think about something that Francesca could do for him, and Francesca could do something, could think about what the EU level, what Roberto could do more in order to improve things going forward and to speed up things, because we see you both very passionate for what you're doing and very determined to make it work this time even more than in the past. And the only option that I give you, or the additional question that I give you, is perhaps, Francesca, if you had the magic wand, not only Roberto could do something for you perhaps, but also what you would do if you could in Italy to improve things that you are not currently able to do. That would leave us with a series of 4 statements, and we will maybe be able to put them together. So what Roberto can do for Francesca, what Roberto would do if he could.
Roberto can always do a lot. So
what Francesca could do for Roberto, and what Francesca would do if she could. Free to answer whatever you want, obviously, but that's just a joke to come to an end.
No, like maybe while Roberto was speaking, also I was thinking it's very important, this kind of standard question, and how do we make it happening? So walk the talk. I love this expression, because I think that's what we need. Obviously, there are gaps, and we know there are gaps. For example, when it comes to late stage, large ventures, we know we are lagging behind. CDP Venture Capital just started a fund with an objective to raise 400 millions for large ventures, because we know the scale-ups otherwise will go somewhere else in order to grow, because the market it's not there yet, or it doesn't seem to be there yet. So I know that that's where we need to work. For example, I was absolutely thrilled by the idea launched by President von der Leyen of the Technological Sovereignty Fund. And I know, so for me, that would be a part missing also, because we are doing pretty well now laying out the infrastructures, I would say. Well, we do need more funds in infrastructures, and I know Roberto can work on that and is working on that. We have to do more when it comes to technology transfers. So, for example, we are investing in infrastructure for research. Actually, Italy, let's mention it. We are leading with supercomputing. We launched together a few days ago in the Bologna, in the Tecnopolo, the Bologna, the Data Valley in Emilia-Romagna. We launched Leonardo, which is the exascale supercomputing, where of course we are going to work also as the national fund to unleash, to create a pole of technology transfer, to work with academia, with research centers, but to develop the startups that are going to work with artificial intelligence, big data, digital twins, and all the innovations that will happen there. And, we are also having an investment in microchips with ST Electronics in the south, in Catania, in Sicily. So we are basically bridging all the pieces, yeah? If you ask me what do we need, is to link better, to be more systemic about that, because we need the tech transfer, we need the infrastructures, we need to have the big funding to grow CDP venture capital in the future. And maybe this initiative of the Technological Sovereignty Fund, my question to Roberto is, how do we make it work? How do we really at this time are capable of leading in the next wave of innovation, which I think it's the green innovation, it's the green value chain. But I think for me, it's not enough to keep seeing Europe as, let's say, the super regulator. Yes, we're doing a lot of things well with cybersecurity, with data protection, with antitrust, with all that Roberto is doing with digital ID and payments and data spaces and so on. But how do we get that, we are also competing in scientific technology and deep tech innovation, and I end here.
Okay, so I managed to have Francesca ask you a question eventually. So Roberto, I let you answer my very broad question and Francesca's in particular.
Many thanks. Indeed, if we look at where Europe stands, it has been thrown into a much more political role that we could have imagined a few years ago because of the pandemic and now because of the war. So we are a geopolitical actor collectively, not individually, a geopolitical actor not only when it comes, to fundamental issues, which is the world order, but also more and more, since the world order is a technology order, when it comes to issues about the global governance of technology, where indeed we come with our strong passport, which is the so-called Brussels effect, the way we are able to govern the complexity or the juncture between the public interest and the economic activity, and the directing towards that must be a social value that is unlocked in all of this. That's the EU model, human-centric, call it as you like. But also we have to counteract the kind of say, well, when it comes to high technology, Europe, where it stands as US, China, US. Well, frankly, 2 Nobel Prizes out of 3 in quantum physics this year. We have the European supercomputers, which are stable in top 5, and watch the space because we have another gigantic computer coming in a few months. We are leading the world in hybrid quantum and traditional computing, in quantum communication. So clearly, Europe is the largest digital market of the world by GDP. So, clearly, we are not there just to watch the show. Where the problem is, and I'm coming to also the cooperation with CDP and the idea of the sovereign fund, is that I think collectively we have the strength. Technologically, think about the mRNA vaccines and the rest. I mean, we also show that when it comes to fundamental problems of the existential problem, your voice assistant provided by the commercial company doesn't solve the problem. But it has to be fundamental research. mRNA vaccine is fundamental research sponsored by Europe that solves fundamental problems for the humanity. That's the way it works. So there, I think there's no doubt around the world that it's clear that they see where Europe is placed in all this. Where they have a little bit of a difficulty is to understand where corporate Europe goes and what is next. Because corporate Europe, it's a little bit looking at the past, looking at protecting, the status quo. Maybe it's structural. So when it comes to the digital green transformation, there's always a but. There's always where we go from there. We have great products. Beware that innovation has to come slowly, but innovation you don't really control it. Think about the mobile phones and Nokia. What happened? So that's where Europe should and must improve. In this link between traditional corporate, the innovation ecosystem, and the great role we have in the world in terms of the governance of the world when it comes to the big issues. And that's where also you need a lot of Europe, because individual member states cannot do it. The only scale that makes sense, think about the regulation of online platform, the only scale, and as it is now in European law, is European one. So the idea of the sovereign fund is to give fuel to this transformation of the industrial ecosystem of Europe, to continue this investment in fundamental infrastructure, to attract more talent, more capital into Europe, and more data as well. And then it comes the partnership with the long-term investors, like CDP. Because, when you look at the mission, which is about not looking at tomorrow, but looking in some time from now, giving a kind of maybe not so attractive return for speculators, but for serious investors, a sustained return and serious return on investment, then CDP and the other long-term investors are our natural partner in this vision. And that's why, we have a very positive experience with the CDP and the other promotional banks in our broadband fund, which started small. We have put ourselves 150 million. They came in, the European Investment Bank came in, and then a lot of investors from the private sector came in. Now it's a billion fund. It's not that big, but it helps many alternative network operators around Europe with a decent return on investment. So, working on a sovereign fund doesn't mean to waste the money out of the window. It really means that we can have a very interesting public-private partnership to actually get a return on investment of the business proposition of Europe, which is doing things with a meaning. And I think in this, looking at other sovereign funds that there are in the world, I think our will be very special. If we succeed, will be very special. I cannot say it will be more ethical than others, that I don't say, but will be with a purpose. And that will be very special. If we manage this miracle, we have managed many important results in the past. I'm a great believer of, must be, because it's been really announced with passion and with determination by the president, but it's really a very important initiative for Europe.
Ambitious.
and ambition.
Ambitious. We like this final word. We need to come to a close in this session. It was very interesting for me. I hope also for all of you to give you some space also to show what the thinking behind what you do is, and both for Francesca and Roberto, because I think this conveys also a sense of purpose, indeed, in what you are doing, but also the key idea that I think we've always shared also in the work that we've done here at SEPS, that not all innovation is equal. I mean, some innovation contributes to a medium to long-term vision much more than others. You can invest, I don't know, billions of euros in an AI system that makes you snap a better selfie, or you can build Destination Earth. And so there are two slightly different things, right? And so this is what the directionality, as we call it in the literature in this field, that is given to innovation. This is where it kicks in. It is very important that public policymakers and lead institutions that fund innovation give the direction to innovation, so that innovation not only makes the economy move, but also makes Europe go in the direction in which it's chosen to go. So thank you very much. Francesca, thank you very much. Roberto, I will ask all the audience, and ideally the ones that are connected online, to give a big applause to our two guests as we come to a close. Meanwhile, I will call my colleague Mallory Schaus to come and moderate the next session, and I will accompany our two guests.
So my name is Mallory Schaus. I'm a research fellow here at SEPS, and we are very pleased to welcome to the second panel four distinguished startup and scale-up representatives with fascinating and very inspiring profiles and career paths. So thank you very much to be with us. So let me briefly introduce them to you. We have first Professor Chiara Petrioli, who is the founding partner and CEO of a deep tech startup called WSense. Fabrizio Guglielmini is the current chief technological officer of a digital scale-up, which is called Brand On Group. Then we have Mr. Stefan Wilderman, thank you for being here, founder and director of B4 Plastic. And then we have with us Theo Perronin, co-founder and CEO of Alice and Bob, a very recent startup. So thank you very much to be with us. So we'll have 3 rounds of questions discussing your respective companies, but also how best to nurture deep tech unicorns in the EU. And we'll end with a 1-minute advice to potential other entrepreneurs by our representative. So let's start with the first round of questions, and please limit your answers to 3 or 4 minutes each. So the first question actually relates to okay, so the first question relates to actually what are deep tech unicorns, and we'll start with Professor Petrioli. How would you actually best describe your company, WSense?
Thank you. WSense is a deep tech scale-up which was born as a spin-off of University of Roma Sapienza. So it started from international patents, providing disruptive technology, changing how we can communicate underwater, how we can monitor the underwater worlds. And then based on this, we became pioneer, and we developed the Internet of Underwater Things. Okay, so as in the terrestrial world, we are able to connect to each other, and we're able to send everything using IoT devices and using our cellular phones. we don't have this capability underwater, where Wi-Fi and even the radio communication that we use above water don't work. Wi-Fi propagates a couple of centimeters. So we had to completely change the way of thinking, and we started in research labs, and we actually made it happen. And we made it happen. We got the international patents on how to develop underwater wireless mesh networks. And we hired our first employee, starting a spin-off in 2017. In 5 years, we have grown to around 50 people located in Italy, where we have our R&D, Norway, and UK. And we have been developing, self-supporting ourselves until 2021, where we develop our first line of products, actually Internet of Underwater Things solution, being able to monitor until 300 meters depth. And then we open our first round of investment. And we actually closed it in 2022, a gathering, the first 4 million for our organization for scale up, and actually Cassa Depositi in Prestiti invested. And this actually led me to change my activity, moving from academia, and I'm an innovator and also university professor, to becoming first the CTO and then the CEO of the company. Where are we right now? We have been developing solutions that allow us to fill a gap. Today, you have satellite technologies that are able to simply observe the surface layer of the ocean and seas, 71% of our world. And we have developed technologies that can go right now till 300 meters depth, that are able to connect any sensor, and from the depth of the seas and oceans provide this information till the surface connecting to the internet. We have developed the Internet of Underwater Things, and also an underwater wireless infrastructure that creates kind of what gives us the connectivity above water. So underwater wireless exchange of information. Why do we need that? To enable future autonomous robotic resident systems. We're applying this to the energy sector, offshore renewables, monitoring cables or critical infrastructure, something that came to the news recently, and even environmental monitoring and digitalizing aquaculture. These are the sectors in which we're working right now. Just to close, saying we don't think about this environment, but the blue economy, the economy exploiting these resources, is actually the eighth economy of the world, 2.45 trillion euros, faster growing than any other economical sector.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to Mr. Guglielmini for Brandon Group.
Thank you. Thank you for spelling my name correctly too. I'm Fabrizio Guglielmini. I'm CTO of Brandon Group since 2014. Brandon Group was born as a digital distributor and now is a marketplace enabler, which means that you may know how marketplace has been a buzzword lately, even before COVID, because e-commerce keeps on growing. I mean, latest figures say that by 2027, the e-commerce global market size will be like 50 trillions, and 60% of that is going to happen on marketplaces. So that's clearly the place where the product has to be, because the customers are already there. How we do that? We do that in a technological way. So we connect all the stakeholders of the entire value chain of the e-commerce. So think about being connected in real time with stock levels of our suppliers, with data sources of product metadata online, with competition data, so pricing of the online competition, to be connected with all the stakeholders that allow the distribution of products, so logistics, carriers, 3PLs, 4PLs, and so we build the data infrastructure that is able to place the product in the right place at the right price and to optimize the fulfillment. We are closed last year at 37 millions of revenue, keeping on growing. We started focusing on marketplaces in 2016. And more recently, we grew internationally because thanks to CDP, we acquired a French company just a couple of months ago. So now we have 50 people in two offices in Italy, in Milan and in Naples, and then we have 25 more people in France in two offices. And the goal is like to keep on scaling. I mean, more everything, more connectors, better algorithms, and we are still scratching the surface of what we can get with ML and AI-based algorithms for forecasting demand and for making the better online prices. And we believe that we want to be, for all the European companies that they want to access to the online marketplace market, we want to be their enabler of choice so that we can make them grow globally as much as we want to do. Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's turn now to Stefan de Wilderman regarding the B4 Plastics company.
Now it's on, yeah. Okay. Hello to all of you. Thank you for inviting. My story begins a little bit also as the first speaker. I'm a bioengineer from Belgium, and I started my career after my PhD in industry for 11 years. And then I went to academia, and from there I saw that a lot was possible, but it was not transferred into industry. And to form the bridge in a very important sector, which is very connected to the Green Deal of Europe, it's the materials and the plastics industry, where academia stop at, let's say, 100 gram or 1 kilogram prototyping, and the market is many, many millions of tons of plastics. And big corporates don't have many installations to get it out of the labs and transfer it in their own production series. We detected a huge gap, and Europe detected with us a huge gap because we were supported a lot. That's for the next question. And we are a bit like the Lucky Luke or the Daltons, if you know the four brothers. It's the four guys. We are one of the first companies in the world that have installed equipment to have it out of the lab in different stages up to a pre-commercial and then a full commercial scale. And it's strange, I could not see it myself, although I'm the founder of the company, but now the biggest brands of the world come to us and they ask us for their own sustainable materials to develop them completely customized for their own application, going via the Daltons up to their own equipment and their own product portfolio. So that's what we do, very IP intensive. That's why I'm here in this deep tech, at least we are deep enough tech, I would say, to make it all happen. Well, yeah, well, deep enough. Well, yeah, we are not underwater. We are still a little bit underwater, I think. Yeah, it's a very busy business. I was alone 4 years ago. And now we are with 20. We will hire 5 people for it. It's in full growth, and it's also a special moment for me to be here in Brussels because it's 7 days to go before Europe will participate in our first capital round. And so we are set by big corporates from Europe that we play a little bit the face of what the Green Deal mentions to be. So we try to be as much as we can as such.
Thank you very much, and let's turn to Mr. Perona.
Thank you for the microphone. So, hi everyone, thank you for inviting me. I'm Theo Perona, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alice & Bob. So at Alice & Bob, what we're doing is that we're building the world's first universal fault-tolerant quantum computer. We're definitely a hardware startup. My co-founder and myself started the company in February 2020, so a bit more than 2 years ago, straight out of our PhDs in quantum physics. And now, a bit more than 2 years after, we're nearly 60, or a bit more than around 60. We raised 30 million euros to venture capitalists, and we're still pre-revenue. So what we're doing at the moment is that we're fighting against the paradox of building a quantum computer. So we live in a classical world. You're not teleporting, you're not at several places at once. But this is what we're asking our quantum bits to do. And so the paradox is the following. So on one hand, you want a machine that is perfectly isolated from the rest of the world. And on the other hand, you want that machine to be controllable, to be a computer. And matching those two is tremendously difficult. But what our chance, our asset, is that we developed during a decade of academic research a technology, a novel kind of quantum bit design to avoid decoherence, to avoid errors that tend to happen now in the current stage of quantum computers. And so we're leading the race shoulder to shoulder with Google to build the world's first fault-tolerant, so without errors, quantum bit, and we'll be delivering our first machine prototype on the cloud next year.
Let's turn to the second question with you, Theo Perronin, regarding access to capital. What are actually the types of financial support that your company has been able to benefit from at EU and national levels?
Yes, our main source of funding is venture capital, so we're backed by VCs, mostly French VCs, but we are also leveraging non-dilutive capital. And here we accessed both national and European types of instrument. So we were laureates of the EIC Accelerator program last year, which finally is now getting deployed. So with the grant, about 2.5 million euros of grant and an equity promise of a bit more than 7 million euros in our case. That we're still negotiating at this point. We're also part of research programs like Horizon 2020, where we're contributors throughout our partnerships with academic labs, as we're still doing basically fundamental research at this point. And the other public funding we're getting is through the national level. So in France, there is this BPI, so French Public Investment Bank, who is supporting us both through dilutive and non-dilutive financings. So in terms of dilutive, they are shareholders of the company, basically about 10%. And in terms of non-dilutive, well, we applied to and were awarded several subsidies to about 2 million euros at this point.
Thank you. Let's turn to Stefan de Wilderman regarding Before Plastics.
Yeah, we are a real bootstrapping company. That means that I was calculating 4 years ago with 500,000 euros, to be honest, in the plastics industry, which is very capex intensive. So this was a paradox on its own. But going from there, we kept for a very long time, till today, full autonomy. Next week, this will change a little bit, and it's very good. I come to that. But what we have done is to generate some minor turnover, gain credibility by that from banks, from customers, early customers. And then as we are so IP intensive, we were like crazy going into Horizon 2020 projects at the time and in national funding programs for developing novel products. And I really did that, I have to say, partly from a gut feel. I was something like, people were calculating like, you cannot make it, you're not strong enough yet, you don't have people enough yet, you don't have labs enough yet. But I always said, let's get the people, let's build the labs, and let it all come. We have to grow, isn't it? So I have been calculating. We now luckily have a CFO, but we after 4 years, we got to about 8 million euro of non-dilutive funds from all those research programs. This will now be added with 6 million euro from the first investment rounds next week with Europe on board. And then for the rest, we have started to make some turnover. So that's of course also revenue. And altogether, it's amazing. I didn't realize, but when I started, when you have a due diligence, you have to add up all what you've done in the last 4 years. And then I came to a number of non-dilutive 8 million euro of funds that we had. The good thing is there that this gives you a lot of autonomy, and I believe in the rebellious way that we do, that we create novel materials in a very conservative sector. There are so many reasons why this plastics world cannot change, and we all know that it has to change. The bad news might be that you realize you could grow faster if you are even letting in dilutive funds earlier. But this is a balancing act. Right. And I believe good roots make a very good tree. So the roots are there. So the rest is for the future.
Thank you. Let's turn to Fabrizio Guglielmini.
No, yes. We started in 2014 with a seed from angel investors of 600,000. After that, we gained like 14 millions from private equities and venture capitalists, most notably with CDP joining in 2016. As far as national calls, we mainly looked at national or regional calls. I remember, for instance, the funding related to the Italian government that gives you tax credit for research and development or for digital transformation. And then the latest one that we did with CDP was about CMEST, which gives you funds for not just for digital transformation, but even because we grant to the Italian businesses the capacity to export. So those are the two main reasons that we accessed funds for. We never really looked at European level since this year. I strongly believe that what we did this year with the M&A acquisition of a French company really gave us the European focus that we want to have. And I think it's nice to caring and challenging mutually with CDP about how we can mutually grow internationally. And this is what we want to do in the next year. I like when you said that we are busy. I mean, probably we're more busy in doing business than in leveraging the right investments. But maybe it's something that we will talk about later today.
Thank you. Professor Petrioli.
Well, the Internet of Underwater Things revolution has been funded by Europe from the very beginning, because I think my research and my innovation have always been funded by competitive grants. And actually, all this and also WSense started when I was leading an FP7 project called Sunrise, and we started developing the international patents. It became a success story, went to Digital Agenda of Europe. And actually, there was an incredible team, young engineers who wanted to make it happen. And this was exactly when it started. And then we needed some funds, and we didn't know how to start. And we went for a competitive grant, European Agency for SME, and we actually got it to bring from academia people that just handed, the team who had just handed a program, a PhD program, and they could enter and grow, okay, in a company. And this was actually what that European Agency for SME grant was covering, and it is how we started. And we started with a small grant, 200,000 euro. But at the end of the grant, we had grown to over 10 people, fully hired, and we were growing, and we became another success story. And then, actually, Blue Economy Pilot Projects, another European Agency for SME grant that then became CINEA, funded us in developing the Internet of Underwater Things applied to digitalizing aquaculture. So that was actually a minor amount of funds with respect to the one we needed to grow and develop this and bring it to real products. The majority of it came from private companies that were covering our non-recurring engineering costs, but it was essential to get this kind of support to start and then to have what we needed to really bring to real the innovations that we were considering, and that working with companies already from the beginning, we realized it was critical to develop and make it happen and bring it to product. Then in terms of funding, VC funding, we waited until we had a first line of product. As I mentioned, the system providing in situ real-time continuous monitoring from the underwater environment. And then we needed to organize to grow, because we had more and more companies interested into this for environmental monitoring, ESG, to provide evidence that they were developing sustainable processes for protecting critical infrastructure. So we had more and more interest by companies. We're mostly B2B, and partners. And this is when we got funds by CDP this year, actually, and from club deals, so kind of family and friends, and the small family office. This is when it started. And then we won, again, Europe, the Blue Invest Award 2022, category Ocean Observation. So we are now working and seeing also if we can further leverage in the next round, money from European funds coming from EIF co-funded programs. So we have a 6 million euro round open right now. And we also recently, last month, won the EIT Digital Challenge as a top European deep tech scale-up, and they're also supporting us. So it's a story combining business, because we are a B2B, and support in this growth by national, institutional VCs and Europe, actually.
Thank you very much. So with this insight, let's turn to the third and final round of questions. Could you please share with us some of your thoughts as to what you believe is still needed for Europe to create more favorable conditions for deep tech unicorns to become EU, but also global leaders? Starting with you, Fabrizio Guglielmini.
Well, I listened a lot of what we said and what has been said today. And when Francesca says about ambition, and Massimo said something about looking at overseas competition, and Roberto talked about innovation. I mean, this is exactly where we want to be. We have been in the Financial Times fastest growing European growing company for 2 years in a row, and we're wondering if we will be able to keep on the pace and what is needed to keep the pace. Well, first of all, when we discussed with Chiara, when we met before this meeting, probably we should networking better and more, meaning that probably we are good at building products. Companies are supposed to be good at building products and services, and they're even supposed to be good at attracting funds. But for sure, we are not the best at managing correctly the opportunities. Maybe just simply because we are not even aware that the opportunities are there and exist. So being able to build an ecosystem that allows the companies, first of all, to be perceived as a unique, very promising and capable ecosystem to produce international growth and global growth, and then to be able to fully understand which are the possibilities for funding and to have access to the capabilities and the skills to be able to manage those funding, because companies are, even startups and scale-ups are not being built with all the people inside that are able to do this kind of things at a scale-up level. So when we look at the evaluations and the financing rounds of overseas competitor, it's scary because probably you accept to be outsmarted by another company. You don't want to accept to be outfunded by another company, if you know what I mean. But I think that if we build together a network to make this possible, this will help a lot in having the next unicorn coming from this room. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Petrioli.
No?
Yes, I would say that there are 3 aspects. So financial support, of course, VC money, and legislation. These are the 3 points. For talking about financial support, I think I want to share with you our ambition. Okay, so we are bringing information, so we are enabling monitoring as the IoT in the terrestrial world for the 71% of the world covered by water. And actually, we know this key part of the world that is bringing a lot of resources for the future, energy, food, and answer to the climate change less than faraway planets such as Mars. So what do we do? What want to do in the next 5 to 7 years? Well, we want to get 10% of the market share associated to this. 1 million kilometers in cables, in underwater cables. 12,000 offshore platforms. okay? I'm making just some example, 43,000 offshore wind turbines by 2030, okay? 70,000 marine reserves, and so on, okay? So of course, we are working hard with leading stakeholders, business companies, okay, as well as sometimes governments to get large projects. We have multiple discussions for large projects. Say, what is a large project? For instance, a 10 million euro in project, okay? We are right there in the curve of scaling up. So if and when, okay, soon, I think, we'll get this kind of contracts and multiple ones, how can we actually make it happen? We need a structure, we need immediate access to finance. This is a big problem. Even going through very selective processes, winning the awards I mentioned before, you don't get access easily to cash when you need, simply because you have a contract. This is the first problem that I want to raise because I think it's critical, okay? The second is access to VC. There, I think there is something more interesting related to us as Europe becoming really a digital single market and a digital market for a scale-up and startup and deep tech companies, something that was mentioned before. Because, for instance, we talk among each other, and we don't have the same opportunity with respect to US companies, Canadian companies, but even with respect to other countries. I'm from Italy, okay, so it was very difficult, actually maybe one fund supporting really deep tech in my view. But when I talk to very similar companies, okay, we are in the same panels and so on from Ireland, they received in the same situation, actually we had revenues that they did not have, okay, same market and so on, 14, 15 million euros, where I mentioned that we received 4, okay? So it's like wanted to win a championship, like the Olympic Games, but with, 20 kilos in your shoulder, okay? We have to sort it out. We have to go and also giving access to the champions equally at the European level and make them also perceived as European companies so that they can scale up easily within a European digital single market. Last thing, legislation is key. For us, for instance, there is an issue. For in situ monitoring, if we go to government, there is a legislation saying that for space monitoring, it's European. In situ monitoring, each single country decide what to do. And we have legislation asking very few, as it was true in the past, where it was complex to monitor. Now we are speaking about United Nations, basically our goals, United Nations sustainability goals, were key for SDG 7, 13, and 14, okay, climate, life below water, renewable energy. And it's possible easily to have underwater IoT providing you this information. Legislation, in many cases, asks to get 1 sample per year, something like this, because it was complex and impossible to do. The fact that the legislation, this is an example for us, but the fact that the legislation keeps up with what technologies make possible, also to support the real green revolution, it's key. Okay, also to support the technological innovations that are trying to support this revolution.
Thank you very much. Theo Perona?
Yes, I'd say my thoughts are twofold. The first one would be larger funds, and the second one is public procurement. Why do I mention that? For me, the threat to deep tech unicorn is not the deep tech part. Europe has plenty of talents, plenty of very promising technologies. The challenging part is growth. And so if you take a simple math example, in our case, we'll be soon trying to raise our Series B, and the order of magnitude, if we want to keep on the same trajectories as our US-based competitors, we'll be raising, let's say, 100 million euros plus or minus 30%. But then you have a question, what kind of fund can lead such a round? A fund cannot invest more than 5 to 10% of its vehicle in a company. So now you do some quick math and you see that you need larger funds. Size actually matters. So here is a simple tip for European policymaker and the various arm branch of Europe. Through funds of funds, you can influence the venture capital and the growth market, and here you have a great impact. The second part of my answer was public procurement. Public procurement is your best leverage at transforming a company. It's smoothing the risk profile of a company, and it helps, especially for deep tech, transforming academia-based company into revenue-generating company. It's a real change of mindset, people, of the way the company is structured, and it's a great way to attract foreign capitals as well and get your leverage there. So there you go.
Thank you. And turning now to Stefan de Wildeman.
Yeah, now I have to find some other things maybe to advise, and I still have. The first one is that I have in my European pocket here the strongest material in the world that is degradable. And we are with a European player making products from it. One product you can make from it is a trimming line where you can cut your grass with. And it would be very good, as we hold in Europe and we give to the world this innovation, that as soon as a degradable version of such a product exists, that the regulation jumps on it and that it's recognized and it's regulated. Because if you show with a market leader that it's possible to have a degradable version of something that is being spoiled in nature, why would you not push the regulation to speed up and to give your European players and innovators a competitive advantage? I see that not yet happening so much, but it's an advice. The second thing that happened to us is that it happened last November. We became a winner of the Food Planet Prize from Stockholm, Sweden. And that's the double amount of the Nobel Prize. That's of course a personal decision of someone that became rich in his life to spend money on initiatives like ours, but maybe in Europe this can happen more. And I don't know exactly how it should be or how Europe can help it, but people that are wealthy and that want to give back something to society, make it easy maybe for them to do so. I don't know the regulations about it, but it happened to us, and you cannot imagine what recognition and what special feeling it gives on your shoulders to be recognized as such. So that's two maybe other advices.
And let's turn now to the 1 minute advice by each of our representatives to other potential entrepreneurs, starting with Professor Petrioli.
I think one of the key aspects in making it happen is the team and the values that are shared by the team. So I think in general, I think that if you have a strong team, a strong idea, strong values, and you follow your dreams, I think despite the many challenges that we have been discussing today, this is a very solid, very solid route for success. And then as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to make mistakes. I think it is impossible not to make mistakes. Try to limit the problems out of it, and actually be resilient. And I think how you cope with problems and how you can translate problems into opportunities and how you can actually become stronger every time you make a mistake is pretty much the key. So it's a question. Then I think you will succeed. The point and what we're discussing in this panel is, how to be very successful, okay? And to do this, I think in general, the final suggestion is you have to try to avoid, blocking wheels. So try to change path if that is working too slow for you.
Thank you. Theo Perronin?
Yes, so I'll give a very specific advice. I think when you're talking about deep tech, you often have academia-based or rooted founders, and my advice to them would be not to try to get the best of both worlds at the same time. This is the best way to fail your project, meaning that you have to put yourself in some danger, in some risk to build up the rage to be an entrepreneur. So yes, that means at some point you'll have to leave the permanent position in academia and this is a choice you'll never regret. Otherwise, you'll just be frustrated not to have really tried. So that's it.
Thank you. Stefan de Wilderman?
I recognize myself very much. I came to a point where I could not stand it anymore. What would happen if I would not do it? So that's completely what you say. I have an advice that know yourself is, of course, a Greek European saying. I have the impression that is applicable to myself and then also to the whole team. I was a lot on the athletics track, for instance, in much younger years. And you learn to understand where your borderlines are, even if you're running against the clock. And somehow this is now translating in my daily work, where I'm very ambitious, but I also know how far I can and should go outside the comfort zone to do quite exceptional things. And I take fully the challenge of doing things that have not been done before, hopefully to solve problems that also were never in this world yet. And if you connect those with an ethical radar in your head, that's actually what we are doing as Before Plastics.
Thank you. Fabrizio Guglielmini.
I would say that you may think that when you become an entrepreneur, you're going to build a product. But at the end of the day, you are going to build two. One is the product that you make for your customers, and the other is your company. And whilst it's quite obvious that you're going to care about the product that you build, it's less obvious that you are going to care about your company. So the company that you're building, which is the tool that is building your product. And if you put the same level of care in both, so if you care about your company, it will attract more people, it will attract good people, it will create the conditions and the environment for success. And so care about your company, and good things will come.
Thank you very much for this very insightful discussion. We hope to guide in this way the EU institution to further nurture deep tech unicorns and also to inspire other potential entrepreneurs. Let's now open the Q&A session together with Andrea, who wants to ask a question to our panelists or perhaps also to Francesca Brea.
Microphone before the people connected online, so I'll still leave you for a second. Was there a question around here? There's one in the back, Monica. Or Carol.
Yes, thank you. Interesting panel discussion. I'm leading work on financial markets here, and until before last session, I thought there is hardly any mention about lack of funding. We presented the report this morning, which shows that Europe is entirely behind in venture capital funding, private equity funding. But when I hear you, it is not so much of a problem. It is a bit of a problem, but not so much. Am I wrong? Also, we presented, for example, data, comparing IPOs and the European market, where the Nordics, above all Sweden, but also Denmark, is well above even the second one, for example, Germany. This year, I think Sweden has about 120 IPOs, Germany only 20.
Yeah, so maybe I can try to answer from my point of view. The question is not the number of fundraise, but the size of those fundraise. The more technology intensive your business is, the more global its market tend to be, and then size matter. So I link it back to my previous note on the fact that we're not lacking a number of investment, we're lacking larger investments. And this is definitely a main threat to leveraging the technological opportunities we're building in our lab. We have awesome funding schemes for academic research, for the technology transfer, but we're lacking the right instrument for growth in capital-intensive businesses.
Someone else of the panel wants to answer to the question?
Yeah, I cite a non-European, Steve Jobs, who said, the real power of innovation is not always in the amount of money you have available. And I add something, typically Before Plastics, on it. If you're special enough, the others cannot follow you anyway. So that tempers a little bit the hunt for the big numbers, we first go for a very strong root and a very strong DNA, exceptional in the world, and I'm sure in a round B or a round C, the money will come and it will be massive. But we don't hunt for it before the time has come to do so. That's also an answer to your...
Well, I completely, what I actually mentioned is it was not easy for us. Yeah. Okay, so I think what I mentioned is it was not easy for us as a deep tech in Italy to get access to funds. It's a question of being in scope and the number of funds you have, the experience they have, and so on. You can have a lot of VC, but if you are not in scope, it will not be easy. And it is not as easy for an Italian company to get funded by a, I don't know, Swedish or French VC. It is not as easy as being a local company. And this is reality, okay? So there is an issue related to that. Then there is another aspect that he was mentioning that is basically the following. If you are a disruptive deep tech, at a given point, when you have the solution and you have the product, you have an incredible high interest by leading stakeholders, okay? Lacking basically access to financial support, VC or loans, okay? Basically means that you cannot structure the company to take all the opportunities. The reality is this. So basically this is slowing down the growth of deep tech. Okay, so I think there is an issue actually. And it may be different in kind of some specific, also cool areas that sometimes get a momentum. Maybe you can intercept in a country and for a topic, a specific area. But actually, it's not as easy as in many other areas in the world. And this is an issue because it's lack of competitiveness.
That's quite interesting. And we've come from a time in which we were talking only about the valley of death. So when you don't get enough funding in the seed moment, and then so you don't manage to get up. You're describing a situation where you transition from a moment where there's too little funding because you're not in scope, to a moment where there might be even too much, meaning that you're not able immediately to seize the opportunities because you're not structured in that way, right?
Yes, so there is an interest in terms of business, so in terms of potential of basically selling to large companies. Yeah, but when you start doing this, it's also something where it takes some time. Let's say that you have a leading stakeholders interest in your technology, you start small, then you accelerate and so on, you have multiple ones. This requires your company to structure first, increasing sales, product management, and so on. So you have to grow cost faster than actually the contracts you get. Or at least this is typical, I think, in many deep tech cases. Mm-hmm. And this is actually the thing. Actually, sometimes you would like to follow some clients because you know that you have problems in getting the funds to be able to go as fast as the market would allow.
We want you to, yeah. Sorry, Fabrizio, go ahead.
I agree with what you said. I mean, there are a lot of different choices that you can take. To quote another at my company who says something like, why, when now that things are starting to work in the good way, we're putting ourselves into trouble, which is what you're saying. So if you want to grow, if you want to innovate, you are going to put yourself in trouble back again as you're keeping on scaling up on your core business, but at the same time, you're going to start up other businesses, which are not going to be profitable at day one. So you have a core business which is profitable, you have an healthy company which is generating profit and revenues, and at the same time, you strive to put yourself back into trouble because you know that if with the funding, you can start up other things that you're just doing with the left hand, but there is no reason to do those just with the left hand. So I think that what you're asking, what we are asking, is exactly that, to have the chance to grow and to innovate the way that we think we proved we are able to do.
I want to make a comparison that you might take home, maybe. If you're riding in a stage of the Tour de France, it's not about accelerate as much as you can. It's to choose the moment and the power of your acceleration. And that's also part of the business. So that's also a little bit what I wanted to say. The bigger is not always the better, and it's about winning the stage if you talk about being competitive as Europe.
Yeah, which comes, I don't know if, because the idea of, I don't know if Francesca, you have an opinion about this, the idea of mentoring or accompanying the growth of a company, which is somehow the genetic idea of the European Innovation Council to some extent, not just helping to scale up, but also through some form of advice and mentoring. Is that working, or is that more of an illusion, meaning that the money helps, perhaps a couple of tips help, but the mentoring of someone, and we can see this clearly with you, someone who has a pretty sharp and precise idea of what at least the research path should be, perhaps not the market opportunities yet, but is this something that could be helpful or not? Or is something else that is needed? I don't know, maybe Francesca will have an opinion about that. You have one, okay. Then if you can add, well, that's just because I'm personally curious. Sorry, I consider that to be a little bit of my living room because I've been here for so many years. But the use cases for your company, the key use cases, if you could name 2 or 3, I become super fascinated, so I'd like to know more.
Yeah, as for the use cases, we started actually, it has application as the IoT to all the blue economy. But it's also a question of timing because it takes some time to qualify a product to enter some market segment. So we have deployed system for environmental monitoring, supporting companies doing construction, for instance, cables, or doing noise monitoring, environmental monitoring, so being more sustainable, ESG, as well as giving our tools for European infrastructures, monitoring the oceans and so on, for instance. Digitalizing aquaculture. In Norway especially, we have solutions, fully ready solutions for fully digitalizing. So it's environmental monitoring, wireless structural monitoring, even fish welfare monitoring, and so on. And then we're working in the energy sector, okay, but with solution also, which is the next wave, actually going to several thousand meters and creating the infrastructure for future autonomous residence systems. We have a partnership with Saipem, for instance, and we're going with others, so also going towards offshore renewables. That I think will come next year and possibly after in some sectors that requires industrial pilot when you have a already product, but to qualify the following year. And then we're working towards protection of offshore critical infrastructure together with other stakeholders. We are a piece. And that I think also will come in a couple of years. These are just examples. So from
enforcing the fisheries agreement with the UK, obviously. That's key.
So that is example use cases. One I like because we have been working on that for a year, but that is more. It's also providing quantitative evidence about what can favor absorption of CO2 underwater. So towards blue carbon sink, we're also working with scientists and companies in that direction. So this, just to give an idea of what we do. And as for the question you raised, yes, the mentoring. Well, I haven't tried the EIC, okay, because in the blue economy, there is actually an initiative by the EIF and DG Mare, so European Commission, which is Blue Invest. That is what I got, actually, the Blue Invest coaching first, and that was useful. And then we recently got another kind of mentorship and coaching. I think it is useful at the beginning. For instance, when you have to learn what people could be expecting, that you prepare for a deck before you actually go for the first round. But what we have been talking about, okay, like scaling up, becoming a unicorn, I think it's difficult that we find a mentor about it because it means, understanding how to conquer the world and find a very fast way to scale up.
No, I just wanted to quickly respond to this because I see it working pretty interestingly in the relationship between big industries and startups, the mentoring. For example, in some of the accelerators that we're funding now, let's say aerospace or sectors which is really important to get access to the knowledge of the industry, that the mentoring process in the acceleration program really works pretty well because it gives you access to very deep specific knowledge about the industry, but also the network. And the network is actually what you need. I mean, other investors or other specific supply chains and understanding better things that you're not aware. So I saw it, which is also maybe an element we didn't bring so much in the discussion. How is it working, or is it working, the relationship between big industries and startups? What you are expecting there, because we are trying to nourish that. We have a fund of funds that we're working with the large industries, and they commit. When they commit, things are really happening. But sometimes they don't always commit, and then you have a clash of cultures sometimes, or you have a clash in the collaborative spirit.
Well, it's a matter of balance, I guess. It's very true. Well, with my role is what I'm really trying to understand is what we can learn from bigger companies. But as it was before, when we talked about the balance between innovation and driving revenues, or focusing on your core or starting new businesses, at the same time, to quote an engineer of my team, we don't want to go corporate so that there is another startup who kill us. So it's a matter of balance.
Thank you. Let me see if there are final questions or comments, because we're already over time by 5 minutes. But we started this panel a little bit later, so it's only fair to you to give the space that you deserve. If there are no final comments, the rest of the comments or questions can be brought to the cocktail. They will be served just a few steps downstairs here when you exit this room. At least I haven't checked that. There should be one. Normally there is. And so, Mallory, do you want to say something before we wrap up on the fact that we continue this these activities where we want to discuss innovation and the future of industrial policy at the EU level quickly next year?
So just quickly, we are actually launching the call for application to our CEPS forum on the future of European industry, which is actually building on our CEPS 2020 task force on the new industrial strategy for Europe. And we are continuing as of January with the digital, the green transition, but also the resilience of value chains, and also sessions on trade and defense. So if you are interested, just check our website tomorrow, and the call for application will be open. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much, Mallory, and a big applause to our panelists. Thank you, Mallory, for the moderation. Thanks, Massimo, for the organization together with us. Thanks, Felice, and thanks, obviously, Francesca, and everybody who's been with us throughout this event. Now, off to the cocktail, not very far away.